Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Tennis Unfiltered with me, James Gray, of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. As you'll be able to see if you're watching on YouTube or wherever else we might have put this video, I haven't even got a plan for that yet. It's all very haphazard. Fortunately, we're in some very professional surroundings and hopefully we sound a little bit different as well. Me and George are in the same room. Do you have COVID, George?
I hope not.
Great, because last time we did this, we did it in my flat and we all got COVID. Calvin's not here. He will be doing a similar episode a little bit later in the year. But as you will know by now, we've taken a couple of weeks off for Christmas, which is a lovely luxury for the first time maybe ever. For those watching on video, it's not quite Christmas, which is why I'm wearing a Christmas jumper and George isn't.
I did not get this memo, but I don't think this memo was sent to me.
No, in fairness, this was a memo that happened really only in my head. But yeah, we're going to do something a little bit different today. I thought it would be nice for people to get to know us, the podcasters, and in this case, George, and I guess his origin story. I mean, that makes it sound like you're a superhero, George.
It's X-Men, isn't it? That's the big kind of origins one.
I mean, so I have never watched any of the Marvel films or what's the other one? DC Comics.
Yeah.
It's like I have watched bits and pieces, mostly on my partner's TikTok.
They're doing bits and pieces for Star Wars as well. I think now through Disney that they've got a lot there. I've not watched any of them, but okay. I've watched Wolverine and he's quite cool. He's going to have blades coming out of his hand, so maybe I'll just sit like this the whole way through. Like, the big eggs.
George, please stop. George David Bellshaw, born on the 2nd of July in 1992 in Sutton Coldfield, which for people who don't know, and that I was going to say for our overseas listeners, but probably for a lot of our UK listeners as well, it's a large town just outside Birmingham. For those people who don't know Sutton Coldfield, George, what's it like as a place to grow up in?
Oh God, that already feels like a loaded question. It's a nice place to live. I lived in a nice house. I had nice surroundings. We live right by Sutton Park, which is one of the bigger parks in the UK. Actually, funnily enough, my friend when I was younger told me that Sutton Park was Europe's largest urban park, and I've been telling people that for a long time, and I only found out like 2 years ago that that's just completely false.
It's just completely
just
made up, like literally nothing.
The guy told me, I'd be like, I'm fairly sure he would know this. That's the sort of fact he would have and not to question.
How old were you when you learned this, or mislearned it?
Disgracefully, old, with it,
old enough to fact check.
Yeah, about 29, 30. It was someone fact checked me actually, who knew, who said, I'm not sure that is, and I think Richmond Park's bigger in England, and I'm not even sure that's the biggest in Europe.
There's a very big one in The Hague, Den Haag, which I've cycled through.
Other features of my life like this, for a long time I thought potato wedges were potato wedgies, and I also didn't realise that Ottolenghi wasn't actually called Otto Lengi.
Wow!
So I didn't realise he had another first name.
Which I think has been lost to history. No one actually knows.
He's just Otto and Lengi.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
a Swedish bloke. Right?
Yeah. He actually sort of part-times as a German tennis player as well. Otto Lengi. Anyway, did you spend a lot of time in Sutton Park? Happy memories?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I did. I think I enjoy it when I go back more now. I think that's probably kind of just a common thing of being a kid, isn't it? You don't necessarily look at your surroundings. You're like, God, this is lovely. You kind of just muck it around. I remember going around on my bike and stuff with my brother, that sort of thing. Yeah, probably fighting more often than not. But
who do you think the most famous? Because I've done some research, George. In a shock move, who do you think the most famous person from Sutton Coldfield is?
God, I actually have no idea.
Well, Roger Moore's not from Sutton Coldfield, but he lived in Sutton Coldfield. So I think internationally he's probably the most famous one because of Bond.
I didn't know he'd lived in.
All right,
do you know how Sutton Park became a Royal Sutton Park? How the
No, I'm looking forward to the story.
So apparently King Henry VIII came to Sutton Park and he shot a boar from distance with a bow and arrow and thus proclaimed it's a royal.
I mean, I think he was not as good a sportsman as he thought he was, so it's probably a pretty serious achievement.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably questionable whether it's actually true or not.
It is mentioned in Shakespeare. It comes up in Henry IV Part 1, I think. It is mentioned by name. So it is a historic place, that's for sure, and not just the birthplace of George Bellshaw. Your dad was a lawyer, he's now a partner in a firm and specialises in mental health.
So he's actually not a partner now.
Right.
He was. So he had a law firm that he kind of ran between places called Walsall, Aldridge and Brown Hills.
Oh, glamorous, all of them.
And yeah, so his part of the law firm was mental health law.
And your mum's a biology teacher, or was a biology teacher, I should say.
Yeah, she still is, yeah.
And then you were obviously the first child, soon to be followed by a brother and then later a sister. Just based on your parents' professions and like their specialties, it sounds like it was probably quite a supportive household to grow up in, quite a sympathetic one. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, outside of their professions, they were very musical and stuff, so they got me into quite a lot of music when I was younger. So I used to play trombone, viola, bit of piano, to varying...
That is trombone and viola. That's like that. They are the roguest of each section.
Well, exactly. I think like for anyone who has been in orchestras, they're quite often the banter section, I would say, which I think encapsulates me well. I mean, my transition from violin to viola was that I could read all kind of four clefs of music, but I wasn't exactly a devoted musical player in terms of practicing. And a teacher sort of approached me being like, we're really short on violas in the top orchestra. Would you're way off on violin, but we can have you in on viola.
The bar is lower on viola.
A lower viola bar. And then, so I played a couple of years in the kind of our school symphony orchestra on viola, and then did 2 years in trombone. And I was a factor I often use when I'm chatting people up, James, is I was Birmingham School's first jazz trombonist for a little bit.
Yeah. George is single, no one will be surprised to learn. Apart from music, was sport a big part of your childhood then as well?
Yeah, but I wouldn't say through my parents particularly. I think that came from the relationship with my brother. One thing, we were quite competitive with each other. We liked playing lots of different sports. I remember my dad quite early on tried to take us to a couple of sport games. He wasn't like that interested, but just kind of days out. So we had on the Saturday, we went to Warwickshire cricket, and the whole day was rained off. And we couldn't go back on the Sunday because we'd got tickets for Aston Villa v Chelsea. And I think going to that, I'm pretty sure it was the game where Luke Nillis broke his leg.
Wow.
I don't know if you remember that.
Okay.
Like kind of shattered his leg. He new signing for Villa.
Yeah.
And he'd possibly scored in the game or in another one. I can't remember. I was quite young. But from that, I kind of was really into football. But my mum likes tennis, and she had kind of got me going down to kind of a local club that was called Sutton Coldfield to play tennis then.
So what age do you think you were when you first picked up a tennis racket?
Probably about 6. Not like the pros when they pick it up at 6. They're probably twatting it quite well. But I did play at 6.
You just picked it up to whack your brother, presumably.
Yeah.
A nearby weapon.
Yeah.
So you played tennis, obviously, from the age of 6. You played football as well. I know you still sort of play football when your body allows. Were there other sports, or was it just those two?
I fancy myself at most kind of racket sports. Not like to play regularly, but
Could have just stopped at myself. We know.
I play a bit of squash these days, and I'm okay at badminton. Boxing, as you know, I've done a little bit. I didn't really do that in my youth, but that's something
I was gutted to miss your... you've had 2 fights,
had 2,
right?
Yeah.
So the first one, I think I was out of the country, and the second one, it was the night after the general election in 2019. And
about right.
I had been doing the overnight shift. I'd finished work at about 11 a.m. I got home and our boiler broke. So I was like, A, I haven't slept, and B, it's freezing, because it was cold.
It was cold, yeah. It was
really
like a proper
cold.
winter fight.
Yeah.
I'd been in bed with flu all week, and when you've just been training for something for 3 months, you're like, oh fuck, what an absolute disaster. And I remember the first round of that, because it was against Metro colleague
Phil Haig,
who has a podcast on snooker.
Yes, with the great
snooker.
Nick Metcalf. Yeah, talking snooker. If you like snooker, it's outstanding.
That's the place for you. Yeah. And the first round of that, I just remember walking to the what we call it, the corner, and I just could feel the particles of flu just on my chest, unable to breathe. So I think we drew that, which I thought was a good result.
Well, given you're fighting a mate,
yeah,
that's the best
nice
possible
result for everyone.
Yeah. Did Phil have his enormous beard at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for people who know Phil Haig, he is shaved head on top, but this enormous bit. I mean, it looks like it has things.
Viking,
yeah, it looks like it has things living in it, quite frankly. But yeah, so bringing us back to tennis and away from boxing, what are your earliest memories of watching tennis?
I remember watching bits of Wimbledon. I think actually at my grand's house. I seem to remember watching something there. I don't actually have. It sounds a bit weird thing to say because I did go to my grand's house a lot, but I don't have that many like distinct memories that I really think, oh god, yeah, I remember doing this or this there. Like there's the odd board game we played or things like that I remember, but I do remember being there and Wimbledon being on. I think she liked tennis as well, and yeah, my mum loves Wimbledon and things like that. So definitely for me as a younger kid, it was just something I would watch or be on in the background in the summer. So I remember a lot of kind of Henman stuff. I do remember kind of Federer, Sampras, and taking a bit of an interest there, and then. Well, I think I was kind of playing alongside that. It started to become a bit more of a kind of tour level interest when probably Juan Carlos Ferrero was world number one.
I've heard of him. Yeah,
I remember that was I was like, oh, I think we did like a tennis summer camp or something, and you'd probably be. I can't remember what age I was, but you'd be able to work it out by whatever year he was world number one because obviously it wasn't that long. But he'd just won the French Open or something, and we were doing a kind of summer tennis camp and. I remember being like, oh, right, who's world number one? That's, who I'm interested in being or whatever.
Yeah. And, I think it's really interesting. Like, people in the UK will relate to a lot of that and, Wimbledon being on all the time. And we bang on about Wimbledon a lot because it's our home slam. But people outside and people in the US maybe won't appreciate that. Like, there are only 5 channels that are free to air in the UK. Or there are more now, but
back in the day.
Pretty much when we were growing up, there were only 5 channels free to air. And there wasn't a lot of live sport on them. There was a bit, but all the football was on satellite TV. I certainly didn't have Sky growing up. And actually not many of my mates did. So all the football I watched was Match of the Day at 8 o'clock in the Sunday morning on the rerun. And in the summer, for 2 weeks, there was sport on from like 11 a.m. till in the good old days before the roof, 7:30 unless it rained. And it was just this 2 weeks of okay, you were usually on holiday for a bit of it, but it was always on. My mum was a massive tennis fan anyway, but almost anyone's house. My sisters didn't really like tennis, but they did for those 2 weeks, and I think it's why it has that really strong cultural memory for us, I suppose.
I was just going to say, my other amusing, relatively early tennis memory that I think you'll enjoy is that I remember going to the hairdressers once and asking for Roger Federer's haircut, and we're talking about when he had kind of ponytail. And my hair was quite short, so I was quite a way off, but I remember going in and asking for that.
Well, I mean, they can't just give you hair.
No, I know.
What did you expect to happen?
I think they sort of taught me through the stages I would have to go through, and by the time I then went for my next haircut, that had gone. But I did, as a younger boy for a period, Federer was the player I really liked watching. After I enjoyed the
outing yourself here, George.
Well, I was going to say though, while Federer was my maybe first love in terms of tennis, actually, I did go through a phase of really liking Djokovic, which will maybe appease some of our kind of crocodile lovers. But I think I kind of enjoyed.
No appeasing these people, George.
I enjoyed the spell Djokovic had in 2011 when he kind of conquered Roger and Rafa, if that makes sense. And I think I thought that was quite a cool period because I knew how good Federer and Nadal were, and I was thinking, God, no one's ever going to get past these guys. And I remember Djokovic coming through probably coincides with when I had a bit more access to watching some of the tour, and I remember seeing him struggling with his shoulder and stuff, and being called as quite weak guy almost in terms of
there were big physical question marks early on.
Similar with Murray actually when he was coming through.
There
hugely. Was kind of big questions about them too, and Federer and Nadal felt a million miles away, and then Novak just had that 2011 year. You think, shit, this guy's really cool.
It does kind of illustrate how important that passing the torch thing we always talk about is. It is a really important moment, and it's why I'm desperate, and we're all desperate for you to do some pluralization. Your Sinners, your Runers, your Rudes to beat these guys. Okay, they can't beat Federer and Nadal because they're gone now. Nadal will be back for a year, but not in any meaningful way, I think. But they've got to beat Djokovic because it creates those moments that really cement them on people's memories. And okay, maybe you were obviously someone who's very keen on tennis, but for those casual viewers, you need that result where it's like, oh, that Holger Rune guy, yeah, he beat Djokovic in the semi-finals of Wimbledon.
And I think my two likes of Federer and Djokovic as a kind of younger lad kind of manifested themselves in different ways. So when I was playing and learning to play, I've got a one-handed backhand, which I'm nowhere near bloody Federer's, but I think watching someone who is hitting that same shot as you, and I think this has maybe changed a bit now in Britain, but it was quite common when I started playing for people to be taught one-handed backhands here. And I can't, to be honest, the older I got, the more I wish I bloody had a two-handed backhand. So actually watching Novak was probably like where I could see all my own weaknesses in the game being completely eradicated by this human brick wall who was incredibly flexible and durable versus someone who, his backhand could be got at by good players and, probably couldn't be as arsed to run around and stuff.
So you were obviously watching these elite level players, thinking that'll be me in a few years. I mean, you were a tall man now, and you were presumably pretty taller than your peers, which is obviously cheating. Were you a good player?
So I think I was okay. I'm not great. So I had. So it all sounds a bit weird to be talking about all this, but yeah. So I had. So when I probably played 6 to 14. At Sutton hard courts there, and then I had a bit of a break actually for 4 years, probably 3 or 4 years. Largely motivated by actually not being able to get on the school team, which, to be honest, I think was more of a personality thing than actual tennis ability.
As in, your personality stopped you playing, as in you were petty, or you didn't get on the team because you were a dickhead?
That one, probably, to be honest. And I do have at that period of my life, I think I definitely wasn't the most popular amongst the kind of faculty.
15-year-old boys really are.
Yeah. But then I would turn up every summer and play house tennis because I could still play. And I would, give the school guys still a fair run for their money. And then they got a point where I was 17, I think, kind of second year before the end, where I turned up and I'd had a bit of a growth spurt and I was still pumping down big serves and stuff. And they were like, I think you need to come and play on the team. So then I did play on the team. And actually, funnily enough, my partner at school, he's, I think it's his mum, used to own Lyle & Scott. So we had Lyle & Scott tennis gear.
Nice.
I've lost the bloody hoodie, I can't believe it. It's a t-shirt I've kind of grown out of, but that was, yeah.
I mean, the West Midlands, turns out, was a bit of a hotbed of tennis talent, right? I mean, is it not right that you were due to play Dan Evans at one point?
So picking up where we've left off there, so I've kind of got back into it via school. So I've joined a new club via a different school friend who said, I play here, you should come. So I went down there, and I think I've got a big serve, I can volley well, good anticipation and stuff. Doubles was actually my game much stronger by then. So I used to play things like kind of National Club League around Birmingham and stuff, which was always quite a funny experience because I would turn up, because I hadn't played for so long and I just hated singles. I hated the mentality of it and stuff. But National Club League is you go and play a singles match and then doubles, but I'd be the lowest ranked singles player, even though I could probably take a few of the higher ranked ones. And I'm thinking, for the clubs that like this, I'm going to have a good chance today. And what instead kept happening was I'd turn up and there were people who've come from other countries who just don't have a British ranking. So I got hammered.
So you always get the ringer.
So I wish I could tell you who it was, but I remember turning up one time, playing some bloke with Aussie twang. He's probably 45. I'm 18. I look much physically fitter than this bloke. I'm I'm going to smash this guy. And he's pounding me 1-on-1. And I'm getting so angry. I'm tossing my racket, swearing what the bloody hell's going on? How's this guy beating me so comprehensively? He's got nothing. I'm just what the hell? I get off the court, go to the toilet, have a bit of a cool off, sit down, and find out he was all number 220 in doubles or something at one point, and obviously very good. And
very
the fact
serious
he was making it look so normal was probably him at 0.1% of his actual effort, and kind of embarrassing me a bit.
A humbling moment.
But yeah, so the Dan story was I used to play kind of as a 17, 18-year-old kind of second team / up to first team adults in Four Oaks who were quite often top ranked team in Birmingham in their league.
So it's like quite a good standard, but not like, there were much better players than me who I'd occasionally stand up for if we were short. And one of the occasions I was meant to go up and play first was away to Solihull, where Dan, when he was 330 of the world in singles, would occasionally turn up and play. But I ruptured my shoulder in the club tournament in the same sort of week I was meant to be playing, and I played the tournament underarm serving. I think I got to the semis with this other bloke who was called Nathan, who was even taller than me, and he reckoned he could serve at about 140 miles an hour, which...
Nathan, it turns out, was on drugs.
I mean, his serve was absolutely humongous. Like, probably the fastest one I've faced in real life. But we were a bit of a, like, just thumping huge serves down.
And there was you, like, knocking them over underarm.
Yeah, so the semis was our limitation where we played a guy called Arnie, who was our coach at the club, who used to... He claims, I'm sure he did because he's excellent, but he used to like play at Bollettieri, and so he used to beat Hardy Fish quite comfortably, but he didn't have the kind of money to go pro, and he didn't want to rely on his dad, and I think potentially fell out with him a bit.
I see.
But he took us out to Bollettieri a few years later, so that's how I met
That's
Nick.
how you ended up with your Nick Bollettieri 6am coaching session.
Exactly. So,
I see. This is the origins. Origin stories. It's all starting to make sense now.
But yeah, so I pulled out of the match against Solihull, and then Dan had rocked up and played. So we were due to play each other that week, but unfortunately...
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Yeah.
Well, ever, if you're listening, this is an open invitation. George is just about fully fit. I know he's obviously injured at the moment, but maybe on his way back, instead of a lucrative exhibition in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia, we can get you down to Sutton Coldfield and have a hit on the artificial clay.
It's the match everyone wants to see.
Yeah, sure. I think it almost certainly is. Calvin can be chair umpire.
I'll play him while he's got his torn hamstring or whatever.
Torn calf. You obviously then moved away from Sutton Coldfield and went to Leeds and did philosophy at university. You ended up doing a master's in journalism. Did you first come to journalism at university? What gave you the passion for it?
No, not at university. Probably the least inspiring route into journalism story. This is going to be James, but
all you budding journalists out there.
Yeah. Well, it potentially shows you what's possible in a few weeks of fun, if you like. I got to the end of uni. It wasn't really. You'll be shocked to hear, as someone who studied philosophy, wasn't really sure what to do next.
There isn't a natural career path out of a philosophy degree.
Philosophy apparently isn't that lucrative.
No.
Like, be a bit Socrates going around with a wooden stick sort of thing, like, shouting at people. Maybe.
Be a bit Socrates. Possibly like the least philosophy student thing anyone's ever said. Anyway, carry on.
But yeah, I went to Ibiza with some mates after uni. There was about 14 of us there, and I'd decided... just before that, I was going to do a little blog on the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. And one night, when we're talking like 30 people reading this for the first few articles. I woke up one night and about 2,000 people had plugged into one of our kind of prediction pieces. And I was getting different mates to kind of write little bits in and whatever. I think it was called Original Footy. And as one of our uni friends said, it was about the least original thing. So at least the footy was accurate. I think. But yeah, so I kind of did that, and then I was enjoying it, and my mum said, well, there is actually a career in that if you're interested. And she was probably thinking, this bum's going to be sitting around my house, so I need to get him out doing something. So she sent me to... or point me in the direction of something called Manchester Matters, which is linked to...
Mancunian Matters, which I didn't realise you had ever worked there.
Yeah, so I went up and did a week experience there.
What year? That was 2014?
I think it will have been, yeah.
So I started working at Mancunian Matters in September 2014.
Yeah, so I would have been there a couple of months before.
That's amazing.
That's so funny. So yeah, I went up for a week, and I remember doing kind of stories about... it was like meningitis week, and there was someone from a mother in Bolton who'd almost lost her son to meningitis and things like that, and it's kind of like an audio tune video games music festival that was going on. I went to interview the kind of creator of that, and I was thinking, this is a really interesting job to like kind of meet all these different people, and obviously sport was a big interest, but I actually really enjoyed that more normal
news journalism
side of things as well. so yeah, at the end of that summer, I was in that role. I will try and do this, and I thought, okay, is anywhere still accepting applications for a master's this year? Because I sort of didn't want to wait a year. So I lobbed an application into St Mary's University,
Twickenham,
which was, relatively well regarded because it was linked to a big kind of sporting athlete body. So like Mo Farah trained there and stuff. So actually, you're kind of thinking as a journalist, you'll be near to kind of some potentially good athletes. And I think there was some boxer who was there when I was there. I might have seen kicking around. I don't exactly know what he was doing, but I know that's not very useful. But anyway.
It's the detail that really gets you.
But yeah, so I kind of went there and went to this interview that they invited me to, and the bloke who was running the course was like, "Why the hell was this application so late? The course starts next week." Like,
is this Dara?
It is Dara. Yeah.
So, the other coincidence here is that I actually have taught on this very course, and there are several people who I bumped into in press around the world who I taught on this very course.
So he said, and I'm not sure if this is actually factually true, but it's quite a funny little tidbit. He said, I was the latest ever applicant to be accepted to the St Mary's, which I think would be great. It was like 4 days before my interview,
right,
before the actual course started. So I'm not sure how true that is,
but that's a whirlwind. I mean, I was going to say you must have had to try and find somewhere to live, and that would have been very stressful. But that is very much a stress that you seem to just be perpetuating in your life.
Yeah, kind of used to that.
Never having anywhere to live.
There's a lad who came down from Scotland called Alistair Mackenzie, who's been working out in Italy for quite a while.
He freelances for the Eye. Oh, yeah. I didn't know you did the course with him.
Yeah, we lived together.
So amazing.
We didn't have a.
This is ridiculous. The number of it also shows you how small the journalism world is. But
Alistair's a lovely guy.
Yeah, and a really lovely reporter as well. And a great writer.
He's a great writer, really good. But yeah, so we kind of lived together around there and mucked around. And the other reason I chose that course was because they allowed you to do a kind of dissertation and turn it into a master's. So you can do like a 6 to 12 week journalism course, whatever it is, your NCTGA, which is very close to a government acronym I use in my current work, which always throws me. It's NCTJ, and the one I use all the time is NCTR.
I see. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I've got a qualification in what I'm actually doing now.
Which you absolutely don't.
I don't, no.
You're a civil servant. You have no qualification.
But yeah, this one allowed you to do a kind of dissertation, and the dissertation could be going to make a documentary. So I went with my girlfriend at the time over the summer to Nicaragua to make a documentary about Nicaraguan football, and that's a really fond memory of that kind of period that I think I was really lucky to go and do.
Funnily enough, my upstairs neighbour's from Nicaragua. Tell me about Nicaragua as a place, and what's the football scene like? Yeah,
it was cool. I mean, so we had funnily enough, the guy, so initially I wanted to go make a documentary about Honduras, because...
He got lost on the way.
Well, Honduras, I wanted to do it from a football perspective of, they've qualified for the last few World Cups, compared to a lot of other kind of Central American nations. What are they doing differently?
Sure.
I sort of said this to my course leaders, and they were like, I don't think we're allowed to sign off you going to Honduras. It's currently the highest murder capital in the world. Feels like we can't let you go there.
And the second one is El Salvador, which borders it.
So I then sort of looked on the map and was like, all right, well, how about Nicaragua then? And funnily enough, that year, a guy called Gunter was trying to apply to come over to St Mary's to do the same course, and had a big passion for sport and stuff. So he, I got put in touch with him to be a fixer to make this documentary. So I had someone there in Managua to kind of make contact with people. I think it worked quite well for both of us because it allowed him to say, oh, I've got someone from England coming over to make a documentary. So I interviewed the FA of the Nicaraguan...
President
of the Nicaraguan FA.
Wow.
I can share the video. We can maybe put on YouTube if you want, because it's a 15-minute little thing that's quite fun.
Great.
But it's him holding up a picture of Sepp Blatter and Michel Platini. And sort of
oh no! Oh no! Oh, George, is anyone in this documentary not in prison?
But yeah, we got to go and see the national team train and interview all of them. Got to kind of really a who's who of Nicaraguan football. They had a couple of big young stars who I don't think actually really made it that much in the end, but one played in the Europa League.
All right, okay.
So it was about kind of how football was becoming more popular in Nicaragua compared to baseball, which was the national sport and stuff.
Okay.
And I'll share it with you. It's only 15 minutes. It's not that painful.
No, we'll get it. We'll get it on the Tennis Unfiltered YouTube channel. Absolutely. Yeah. You did come back from Nicaragua, fortunately, and ended up working on the sports desk of Metro.co.uk, not the newspaper, as the Fantasy Football League.
Now.
Well, yeah, they've kind of re-merged again. But I remember when I freelanced at Metro, the Fantasy Football League is called Metro.co.uk, not the newspaper in brackets, right? Because I assume you spend your life on the phone being like, "Hi, it's George Bellshaw from the Metro," not the newspaper, the website.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, like enough people didn't know anyone from the Metro paper that I was kind of just like,
fine.
No one's ever going to know.
No, exactly. It makes you and it opens a few more doors because it's quite people know the paper because it's for people who don't know the Metro, it's a free sheet that it does still exist, although in a much lesser form. But it was it was on every bus and tube in London.
Growing up, I mean, seeing the Metro and stuff was quite like...
Yeah, there's Metro in the morning, Evening Standard in the evening, I suppose the Metro, it was all over the UK. Yeah. Talk to me about, what was your first tennis tournament you covered professionally?
I think it was 2016 ATP Finals. I think that was my first one. So before I'd kind of got into the pure tennis scene, within that I kind of did broader sport reporting, but also... and this probably leads back to some of my kind of Mancunian Matters days. Just they used to get me to do quite a lot of old videos. So I took on like the world's strongest man. I did a boxing fight for them, which I think sort of crossed over actually with my first sort of tennisy thing. I did vegan bodybuilding.
Oh yes, I remember those topless pictures.
I fought
delve through George's Instagram, you can find them.
Fought a British sumo wrestler. So I did lots of kind of random things. The weirdest one I reckon actually in some ways was I sat on a Facebook Live for about 45 minutes and ate what was branded the UK's hottest supermarket curry, and genuinely like 35,000 people were watching me sat in a room on my own eating this curry. We're like,
oh my God,
this is hot.
I'm sort of regretting booking as a curry for this evening. Was it that hot?
It was quite hot, to be fair. And the viewers were pretty insistent that I had to bite the chili lots and lots of times. It was like a weird form of torture.
It's sort of like a precursor to OnlyFans, really. Only chilies.
Yeah, exactly.
Spicy content.
I could have monetized at the time if I'd had the will for it then. So I guess I didn't really, when I was first in journalism, because I'd not necessarily had such a passion for it from a young age in some ways. I was kind of a bit more functional and thinking about kind of more business. Okay, they want people to read the stuff, so I'll do things that I think will be read well. And then I kind of got a bit bored of that after a while, and started thinking, okay, what would I be interested to cover? It feels like football's a very saturated market, which is probably my number one sport, really. Kind of sporting Villa. I really like tennis, so I used to play that a lot, and we were talking at the time about trying to cover other sports and make them more popular. And I thought, okay, I think I can give tennis a good run and cover it quite differently to a lot of national papers and stuff, where it's maybe not getting huge prominence. I could do a lot of kind of lives on Twitter and a bit more video stuff. And
you were in actually for people who don't know the UK media landscape, you're in like a real sweet spot, because this digital race to the bottom that had been going on hadn't really ever considered that there was traffic, frankly, in other sport. I was at the Daily Express at the time, and they were just starting to work out, partly because of me. Not to blow my own trumpet, I take no responsibility for Express.co.uk being an absolute fire show. But they were just working out that you could actually do tennis digitally. And the Tennis Beat, they have all, in their own way and in different ways, their papers have worked out what to do. But I guess you were just right place, right time, basically.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, yeah. And so the ATP Finals was like the first event in the UK after I'd started covering it for a bit, and I made sure I arranged some interviews and stuff there, and was trying really hard to push it, and it actually generated quite a lot of traction. I think my Twitter following grew quite significantly in that one tournament from complete 300 people to kind of 1,500 or whatever. And I think they kind of back at base were thinking, oh, hang on, if he can kind of grow like that at every event he does,
a week,
we can really grow this quite quickly. So that the tournament was, I really enjoyed it. It was the year that Murray became year-end #1, beating Djokovic in the final and stuff. There were some good matches with Raonic, involved in a few as well. But I think it was kind of the next sort of tournament where there's the Australian Open, which I didn't go to, but just to kind of give you a sense of what I was trying to do to kind of get there. I actually went to the office from 12 a.m. till about 7 a.m. every day to kind of cover that.
Yeah,
it wasn't necessarily, well, so 12 p.m. probably actually.
That
which
is
was quite grim, but I wanted to prove this is how we do it. It'll be much better if I'm there, but like I know I need to show you there is kind of long-term gains in this and stuff.
What was your? I mean, I've just got best tournament. What was your the tournament you enjoyed covering the most for any reason?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different reasons there could be. I mean,
there's a particular US Open I seem to remember you talking about where you did. I think you did some work, but mostly were just on the piss for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, so I broke it up with a girlfriend just before that, and basically we were kind of living together. And I sort of handed in the keys to my flat in the morning. I took my flight to New York.
And then spent 2.5 weeks on the rebound.
So, I mean, that was a great... And that whole year, so that really was the main year I travelled on the tour. So I think I did like 20 tournament weeks that year. You know, some of which are where in the UK was like Queens and Eastbourne or whatever. But, yeah, I got out to all 4 majors. I did Monte Carlo and Madrid. I went back out to Madrid for the Davis Cup finals. Like, that was definitely like the height of my journalism career. It was really full on, and I think actually, you know, I probably felt quite burnt out during a lot of it. I think I was really pushing myself, very invested in my work, and you know, probably contributed quite a lot to that relationship breaking down at the time. But yeah, it was great fun, and you really get to know kind of different people on the tour, and you know, I wouldn't go as cringy saying it's like a family, but you know, you're very familiar in terms of...
Oh no, it's like a family. You hate each other the whole time.
The same people are there all the time. You have a good laugh, and there is a bit of a culture of, you know, something. I think some people don't really understand the hours you end up working, or in the places like, you know, Australia. You had matches finishing at 4 a.m. and you're thinking, fuck me, God, I'm knackered. I'm exhilarated because I've been covering this, trying to hit a UK kind of deadline of Conta going out at 4 a.m. or Murray struggling on or whatever, and I think like, God, we need to just go for a beer, and you try to negotiate. So well, that's the Yarrow, just have a quick pint to take the edge off before bed, and then you're back up at 11 o'clock to go the next day. But you know, everyone's in the same sort of boat, and you're knackered after 2 weeks, but it gets a bit easier because there are fewer and fewer matches. And but yeah, so I've gone a long way around answering this, but yeah, I enjoyed New York as the tournament from a kind of personal perspective. Like, that was definitely my most free, but I thought Australia was run really well as a tournament. I'd love to go back there and kind of get another chance to like visit when that's happening. Monte Carlo, I think, is just a brilliant club, but I had a good relationship with Madrid, and because that's the one I did most in some ways. I think I probably did that 4 or 5 times because of the Davis Cup as well was there. I think I just got very used to playing there. There was like a media tournament every year, so you got to play on the actual courts there, which you don't really get to do at a lot of the other ones. No. And yeah, I just think it's quite fun. It's a fun city that you got the tapas late at night and stuff. It's a good one to kind of visit and go to.
The thing that really distinguishes these tournaments is when you can finish late and still go and have a beer and actually get some proper food.
Yeah.
Like, it's a nightmare in Australia sometimes when you finish at God knows what time. And you can go and have a beer. There's a few good late places, but actually trying to find any decent food, it's a real problem. What was your favourite interviewee in your journalistic career, do you think? Tennis, specifically.
So, I mean, there's probably a couple that stand out in terms of, I was like, yeah, I did those quite well. I found them really interesting to talk to. So the first one was probably Agassi. I think I had like the first interview with him after he'd broken up with Djokovic, which was obviously very well read, but actually I think it was a good piece and brought out a lot of stuff with him. And I thought if you've ever have you interviewed him before?
No, I've actually never met him.
He's one of like the most open people I've ever met in like a sporting culture.
His book famously called Open.
Yeah, but he really is just someone, you ask him a question, you're hearing exactly what that bloke thinks, and that's why that piece with Novak I think obviously within limitations, he's not going to come out and call him a twat or whatever, but he just felt quite open, and I enjoyed talking to him, and you can tell he's like quite a different type of person who's probably done quite a lot of introspection to the point where he's actually like, I don't really care what you think of me in some ways. And the other one is probably, I really enjoyed doing the raffle one in lockdown. It wasn't like a very long interview, but I thought,
it's a moment, isn't it?
And knowing I was probably going to be walking away from it fairly soon, that was quite a nice moment to interview like one of the big four on my own properly, do a piece, and I think get quite a good line about, Novak being obsessed sort of thing. That I think that's quite a nice feeling when, I'd spoken to a few people before and said, yeah, I've interviewed Rafa and it's a bit difficult feeling he's kind of padding it off or whatever. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one as well, and he's one of the players again who I grew up watching a lot and have a lot of admiration for. And I mean, I would say, on your earlier question about who I kind of liked growing up, I think once you work in these sports, you soon don't really have favourites. Like,
no.
You have people you kind of find quite personal to get on with. You have players you like watching, who are interesting. But you can't, once you see how the sausage is made, you're not really like, God, these guys are brilliant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well,
You just see it in a different way, don't you? You alluded to it there. You kind of knew you were getting ready to walk away from journalism. Everyone always have an exit strategy. Everyone in journalism has an exit strategy. What was the straw that broke the camel's back for you? What sort of...
there are a few things. To be honest, I'd sort of earmarked early 30s as the time I might go anyway. Because I was, to be honest, I think the way I was covering it and throwing myself into it, I thought I'd struggle to keep that up forever. Yeah. But I wanted... I'm really grateful for a lot of the experiences I had, but I do kind of feel I did it at the right sort of time in my life as, relatively young and exuberant and fun. But the lockdown kind of just sped things up a bit, and I think really there was a bit of a dynamic in journalism as a whole, not just brought on by the lockdown, but exacerbated by it, about a lot of cutting of funding, a lot of why do we need you here, why can't you do this from home? And I kind of got to the point where I was thinking, I'm better than this. Really. I did just think that, and I was also thinking, do I want to go to another paper and not be the main guy, to be honest, on tennis? Do I want to go and
be number two to
one of the other guys? And if one of them left their role, would I actually have a shot at it? Probably not.
I think you're doing stuff down there, but but look, none of them has in the 3 years since, and people don't leave jobs easily in tennis.
Exactly, and B is kind of waiting for your mates to die or retire, isn't it? Really, in a kind of bleak way. So it felt like a bit of for me, like quite a difficult numbers game, and then I was thinking, I don't really want to stay where I am. I'm not sure I'm that motivated about going somewhere else to be not having the access I did. Because by the end I had, pretty good contact book. I was pretty well known. I could get a lot of interviews and access to different things, but I didn't feel like the organisation I was in was kind of treating me like that in some ways. And I think, probably the ice on the cake, I've already agreed to leave at this point, but was, in a different, this wasn't a sport person saying this, but someone had actually questioned what value do I'd get from going to Wimbledon. I was like, do you realise that's not costing you anything? I live here and I will work a lot longer at Wimbledon. And then, it's the sort of culture, the same people then are the first to be rushing around being like, oh, thank God we've got him there when he's got a big story that's being read, 500,000 times, and the Times are picking it up on page 3 that they'd never bloody got if I wasn't there. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Is that same old thing? And that's the same in any kind of industry in place. But at that point, I was really like, well, I'm not being paid enough for this shit. So
yeah, it's a numbers game with Bellshaw. Invariably, I find in life. I've got some quick fire questions, and I've got one slow fire question.
Okay.
So, if you were a tennis player, what song would you walk out to?
Oh God. So I think from the ATP finals in 2016, they had a song called "Unstoppable" by Sia that they played all the time,
Okay, yeah.
and I always associate that. I think that would possibly be on my Desert Island Disc, A, because I like working out to it, but B, it makes me feel back quite fondly to that event, and I think it's a pretty hype song, so I'll probably go for that.
Dream doubles partner? I can guess, but
I think I'd love to go and play a doubles match with Kyrgios. I would. I think it'd be good fun.
I think he's probably up for it.
Yeah, I think I was a good volleyer. I'd love to play against a good server. He's one of the best I've ever seen live. I think it'd be kind of funny. I think I also like a few little trick shots. I'm nowhere near as good as he is, but I think it'd be quite an entertaining little exhibition match. So I'd probably pick Nick. Yeah.
Favorite tennis tournament? No reasons required.
I'll go Monte Carlo.
Last meal.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I think my favourite current restaurant's a place called Land in Birmingham, which is like a huge vegan tasting menu thing. And I quite like tasting menus because you get the wine flight and different kind of aspects and makes it quite interesting. So I'd probably just have something like that. You have lots of little
tasting
bits.
menu for your last meal.
Why not?
Death row, mate. I tell you, speaking of nice vegan dishes, I went to a Mediterranean place in Dulwich recently, and they did this amazing miso aubergine thing. I couldn't tell you what else was on it, but it was absolutely amazing. Miso is really cool when you do good things with it. And one drink for the rest of your life.
I mean, but there's always the temptation to be like, oh, I love a beer. But actually, I think squash is the thing I drink most. Probably go for that. Maybe like summer fruit squash.
That is extremely boring. Well done. Don, we got time for one more question? Yeah. Just very finally, I've got something a little bit deeper to ask you. I know, settle in. This is the bit on high performance where they try and make them cry.
Now, yeah.
If you could change one thing about the way your life has been to now, what would it be? Or if you've got one regret?
Oh, just one. Crikey, that's hard to boil it down. I do sometimes I wish I worked a bit harder on myself as a young person rather than throwing myself into other things in some ways. I think about things a lot more. It's probably hard to believe, but I think a bit more carefully about kind of impact rather than just doing what I want to do and kind of thinking about broader life and what's happening.
Do you mean impact like on other people around you? Or?
No, that, but also like other parts of society and what kind of happens and how that affects other people, and not just looking through my own lens. I think that's something that comes with age and maturity, but I think I really was a bit more selfish than I am now. I still can be selfish in my own way, we all are, but I think I would have liked to have been that person 10 or 12 years ago, and I think I would have enjoyed certain parts of life a bit more.
I think that's a pretty human thing to think. I think we all look at ourselves and go, I am the best version of myself I've ever been. I wish I'd got here earlier, and then I could be even better.
10 years' time, I'll be thinking, what a twat said that.